Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. My colleague Wataru and I are very honored to be speaking at this event, and we're also very excited to be spending the next hour together with you. Today, we'll explore together the concept of systemic team-based coaching and how that can be used for organizational transformation through a co-creative process. And we will be sharing it through a case study so that we can all see how this is applied in real-day work. But before we dive into the topic of today's session, let us begin by sharing a little bit about who we are. So my name is Angie Tong, and I have been a coach for about 7 years. I spent about one half of my life in Canada, the other half in Japan, and then a few years in China and the US as well. Before becoming a coach, I was in the field of international relations, and I knew nothing about coaching before I started actually. But I did experience firsthand the importance of leadership and curiosity. In international relations, we would create so many visions and policies, but they would only live on paper if the people and the teams driving it were not passionate or curious to learn more about a group of people that were different from their own. When I met coaching, I felt this potential for me to make a bigger difference. And today I support leaders and organizations around the world to ignite the full potential of their leadership and teams. I have realized that the challenges and the rewards of coaching leaders through cross-cultural leadership are very profound. And I joined Coach A in 2015. And since then, Wataru and I have worked together on many client projects. I would like to invite him to share a little bit about himself as well. Wataru, would you please share a little bit about yourself?
Okay, thank you, Angie. Hi, my name is Wataru Kurimoto. I have been in this profession for about 20 years. In my previous career, I was an engineer who specialized in agile software development. Since then, I have had a strong interest in teams and organizations that can adapt to change as well as their leadership. My current expertise lies in coaching for organizational transformation. I design and deliver systemic coaching projects for my own clients, sometimes involving over 100 clients and over 500 stakeholders. Both Angie and I are with a firm called Coach A. Angie will share a little bit more about Coach A.
Great, thank you. So yes, Coach A is the first coaching firm in Japan and the biggest professional coaching firm in the world. We're headquartered in Tokyo with offices in New York, Bangkok, Shanghai, and Hong Kong. We work with over 1,000 executives and leaders a year, from a wide range of multinational companies to local hospitals in over 40 countries around the world. Right now, we have 180 full-time staff members, of which over 100 are coaches, and more than 60 of them are ICF certified. However, we did not always start this way. There have been a lot of building over the years, and Wataru is actually one of the instrumental members in growing not just the company, but the coaching industry in Japan as a whole. Wataru, could you please share a little bit about your journey with us?
Sure. 20 years ago, there was no coaching industry in Japan. The Coach A was a company of just a few people, and I wanted to create a new industry through Coach A. At the time, I had no idea that Coach A would last for 20 years. That it would become a firm of more than 150 people, or that I would be able to speak here today. In the mid-90s, the word coaching did not even exist in Japan. One day, the founder, Coach A, came across the word coaching and instantly saw its potential and immediately started his business. With the help of ICF, he created a problem and started production individuals with professional coaching skills to the Japanese market, creating a coaching industry in Japan. In the early 2000s, as coaching was becoming more and more popular, we began to realize that managers in corporate organizations need coaching skills. Over the years, we have provided coaching training to over 100,000 managers via HR. However, a turning point came. The catalyst was a comment from a client with whom we had built a trusting relationship. He said, Coach A's coaching training continues to be the highest rated training program in our company. I really appreciate that. But frankly, I don't feel like the company is changing. We started to reevaluate our value proposition, and after much discussion, we decided to become a group of coaches who bring real change to organizations. Specifically, we aim to become a firm that provides effective executive coaching to executives responsible for organizational change. In the process, we transformed our own organizational capabilities. We began recruiting and developing our own executive coaches, and they personally engaged in top-to-top sales with executives. We also strengthened our research function to support organizational change and began setting up overseas offices to respond to the globalization of corporations. If we did not have this process, the systemic team-based coaching model that we will introduce today will not exist. Angie will share more about how the model came about and what its key elements are.
Great, thank you, Wataru. So the turning point for Coach A was actually not an easy transformation. It was actually a very painful one, but it certainly created new possibilities. From the trusting relationships that the executive coaches created with the executives, opportunities began to emerge to coach them through their organizational transformation. A few years later, we transformed ourselves into a coaching firm specializing in systemic coaching for organizational change. And in the process of providing this value, we discovered that the key elements of systemic coaching were result-focused, process-oriented, and evidence-based. We will touch on these key elements through our presentation today. Before we go further, let us also take some time to share our definition of systemic coaching. So systemic is at the very core of this concept, and we would first like to share our definition of what systemic is. To put it simply, systemic is to grasp the entire organization as an inseparable whole. It's rooted in the belief that people live in relationships and that change occurs in relationships and that everyone has the ability to influence the change. There's also elements of social constructivism in it that state that reality is socially constructed and that co-creation of new shared meaning is possible through dialogue, and this is what leads to change in creating a new future. The concept of systemic as an overall organizational theory is very fragile. We believe that it is necessary to emphasize that the individuals who are components of the system are aware that they're one of the whole, that they're a part of the whole. And all parties need to be a part of the change, driving the change themselves, including the coaches, in order for this model to work. Without this, the application of the systemic coaching model can easily crumble. So that is why Coach A's coaches are always also doing our own business development, our own product development, as well as our own management. We need to be a change agent in our own right in order to be able to create change with our clients. And in this model, we also propose that we incorporate the concept of subjectivation, or the process of becoming a subject. In other words, a change agent who works with the environment. Some of you who are familiar with the French philosopher Michel Foucault may have heard this term before. We incorporated elements from his research into developing our own application of subjectivation. And we will come back to this topic in the second half of our presentation because it's such an important keyword. Wataru will share what needs to be in place in order for this model to be effective.
And what we have discovered through our practice is that there are two things that we need to be in place in order for this model to be effective. First is that the process of designing the organizational transformation itself needs to be created based on dialogue. The success of a coaching project depends on the kind of dialogue between the coaching team and the client team during the project design and sales phases. And second is that we need to focus on the subjectivation of individuals and the chain reaction that takes place between them. In other words, the change of individual leaders and the relationship between leaders are at the core of the whole organizational change. A coaching project will not be successful if the sales team and planners are not aware that they are a part of the client's success. And if the client is not aware that the sales team is a part of the change and thinks that they are just delivering the service, the project will probably also not be successful. Let us walk through a specific case study so that we can better understand how these concepts come together in practice.
Right, so we will first share the background of this case study and then go on to share how this particular project was designed so that we can see what it means when Wataru said that the process of designing the organizational transformation itself needs to be created based on dialogue. And then we will then share about the content design of the case study so that we can touch on point number 2, how it focuses on the subjectivation of individuals and the chain reaction that takes place between them. I would like all of you to listen to this from the perspective of what can we do to create people who are change agents for organizational transformation? And what can we do to increase the number of people with this awareness? We believe that this is the essential value of systemic coaching. We believe that this is a key to making systemic coaching not just an overall model, but a realistic movement for change. And I also like you to reflect on this question. Where do you currently stand in the organizational transformation that you're engaged in right now? And if you were to become more involved, even by an additional 20%, what difference would it make to your current position and your impact on the organization? Depending on your role, whether you're a CLO or CHRO, a CEO or business head, a coach or a researcher, your answers may be different. But keep this question in mind as you listen to the rest of the session. I think you will walk away with much more. Well, let us begin by sharing the background of this case study. We chose this case study because it captures the 2 factors for success of the systemic coaching very effectively. It is one of the projects where the strength of the systemic coaching model was most leveraged. So this is a case study of a Japanese chemical company. We'll give it a pen name and call it Japan Chemics. Japan Chemics executed a challenging cross-border M&A with a North American company. Let us call it North America Chemicals. When Japan Chemics purchased North America Chemicals, it acquired 2 large business units and gained a global operation of over 3,000 employees worldwide. The CEO of Japan Chemics believed that in order to meet the high profit target in 2 years, it was necessary to break down the strong silos in the organization. His first priority was to create a management team that would cooperate and collaborate across departments. And in the process of his own executive coaching, the CEO began to think that in order to change the organization, it was important for the leaders of each department to change themselves. We shared an important insight with the CEO. It was that the change of one individual takes place simultaneously with the change in the overall system that surrounds the individual. We agreed that a new context can be created through the changes of individuals who make up the whole system, as well as a new collaboration that takes place between these individuals. This systemic way of thinking about organizational transformation really resonated with the CEO. The CEO began to see that in order for the change to happen in the organization, it was necessary for the leadership team to work together to increase the operating profit. That the theme of overcoming silos in the organization was a challenge for every single member of the leadership team, not just one person. The CEO invested in coaches for all 8 members of the leadership team. From there, Wataru worked closely with the CEO to lay the foundation for the project. Wataru, could you share with us a little bit more of what you did with the CEO?
Sure. The CEO asked me where he should begin. I requested that he would meet one-on-one with each member of his leadership team, that he would converse with them until they could fully understand the purpose of the project, and until he could gain their full commitment. The CEO said with conviction, if someone chooses not to commit, I would request them to leave the leadership team. This is the most important project for company management. I always ask for this level of readiness and dedication from the project owners. It is because this is one of the key success factors that enable coaching to transform organizations. The conversation process between the CEO and the leadership team actually took 2 months. Here is an overall background story for this case study. What do you believe is the key for starting organizational transformation coaching? Is it the coach's competency, the model that will be used, the chemistry with the client? All of these are important. However, I believe that there are 2 things without which success would not be possible. One is that those who participate in the project are leaders who have chosen to be a part of the change themselves. And 2, that those leaders have chosen to leverage a coach themselves. Without these 2 criteria, we are not ready to start. And readiness is everything. That is why the initial conversations to get commitment is so important. With these 2 points in place, we go through the design process of organizational transformation coaching to increase readiness for the project. Angie will introduce this process next.
Great, thank you, Wataru. So now that we have shared the background of the case study, next we'll talk about the design process. And as we mentioned earlier, the process of designing the organization transformation itself needs to be created based on dialogue. The success of a coaching project depends on the kind of dialogue between the coaching team and the client team during the project design phase and the sales phase. Organizational transformation coaching is not just the sum of the individual one-on-one coaching. Each individual's coaching needs to be placed within the context of the whole. And so in turn, how we reflect the context of organizational transformation onto the individual coaching engagements is important. The 2 keywords for the process design phase are co-creation and interactive. And it will not be meaningful if everyone engaged in this process has not chosen to be a part of the change themselves. So let us look at co-creation first. What is the most important question for organizational transformation coaching? We believe that it is the question of who will you work with? We cannot compromise on who will lead the project. And the best person to do this would be the head of business, who is ready for and committed to self-transformation. And it is with this person that we co-create the project. So what do we co-create? Well, we co-create 3 things. 1, the business story, 2, the shared question, and 3, the milestones of change. Let's look at the business story first. The first step is to create a consistent business story that captures, number 1, what changes in business do you want to create through coaching? And number 2, what changes in the team and organization do you want to create in order to achieve, number 1, the business impact? We use a template that's on the slide right now to clarify the context of the project. And the important point is to articulate what the organizational transformation that you're investing in is and how that links with your business impact. We create this using the client's words through dialogue with them. For the project with Japan Chemics, the story was that all of the executives who are responsible for the different functions would come together, collaborate across departments, and increase the top line, suppress the cost, and all work together to create operating profit. This project story was result-focused and one that was strongly linked with the business impact. After the leadership team heard this story from the CEO, they were able to understand right away that this was a valuable initiative for them. We believe that the foundation of coaching is leadership development. However, it is essential that this does not become the objective itself. Next, we decide on the exploratory questions that all participants in the project will continually reflect on. There's a famous hotel chain where all of the employees share and continually think about the exploratory question of, what is your definition of the best client service? This exploratory question is a driving force that enables them to continually think about what they can do to provide the best client service in their capacity. And it really helps them align their goals and their objectives. Because of this impact, we also create exploratory questions with the project owners and the project leaders, and we share it with everyone who is involved in the project. It becomes almost like a guiding light for all of us as we move forward. And thirdly, we articulate the milestones that we want to aim for. The important point here is that the milestones are articulated as much as possible in the words of the client. We use this throughout the project to enable all of those involved to understand the current progress and discuss about what adjustments and new actions need to be made to be on track. So we talked about co-creation of the business story, the shared questions, as well as the milestones of change. Next, Wataru will share about interactive. And we actually learned about the importance of this concept, interactive, through comparing successful projects and not so successful projects. Wataru, would you like to share some of your experiences?
Sure. I have experienced and learned from many failures in my 15 years of organizational transformation coaching. Most often, it was because the process itself was not interactive. Interactive is important because, according to social constructivism, interactive dialogue enables the creation of new meaning. And this enables more individuals to become a part of the change, and those who are already a part to become even further involved in driving the change. For the case of Japan Chemics, I shared experiences from my failed project with the CEO right away. The CEO requested that he wanted me to proceed interactively in this project. He also asked for my support as he wanted to proceed interactively with all his leadership team and project leader through a coaching approach. As a result, many coaching approach dialogues were created in all corners of the organization throughout this project. So, in many ways, interactive is like a foundation that supports the co-creation. We need the co-create process to be fully interactive for the project to be successful. In these moments where co-create and interactive dialogue take place during the process design, this is when organizational transformation moves forward. Creating this process that keeps living dialogue going is what we call a process-oriented approach.
So now that we have looked at the first theme of how process design needs to be created based on dialogue, with the keywords of co-creation and interactive, we've come just about halfway. And I know that we've shared a lot of information so far, so let us take some deep breaths here and center ourselves again for the next half of our presentation. Please feel free to stretch yourselves a little bit, maybe have a drink of water, pause to digest everything that you've heard, and then put ourselves ready for the second part. Great. Does everyone feel ready to move on? Okay. So from here, we'll look at the second theme, which is at the core of organizational transformation coaching model. And it is that we focus on the subjectivation of individuals and the chain reaction that takes place between them. In other words, the change of individuals and the relationship between those individuals are at the core of the whole organizational change. We'll look at these elements through the process of content design. So there are three keywords for this section. One is that we want to look at the concept of subjectivation in further detail. And then we will also look at the systemic approach as well as what it means for the project to be evidence-based. All of these are central concepts that should be woven into the project at the core of systemic coaching. So in the case of Japan Chemics, the transformation began with the CEO. However, the people who could break down the vertical silos were the executives and the people who worked with them. We believe that at the core of this content design of organizational transformation coaching, all of the people involved need to be aware that they are part of the problem. So what do we coach executives on in particular? Well, we actually coach them on their shift from number one, the observer perspective, to shifting their perspective to number two, a systemic perspective. And we work to create internal coaches that can do this within the client organization. Let's take a look at this concept a little bit further. So in order to enable us to do this, we focus our coaching on enabling the leaders to transition from being a dependent of the environment to becoming a subject who can change the environment on his or her own. We call this transition process subjectivation. And we believe that it is necessary to dialogue from constructing one's own purpose, the organizational purpose, as well as making meaning of the purposes to enable subjectivation. And this was realized through the following coaching structure. First, the executives work with us as their external coaches, and we aim at the executive's own subjectivation. At the same time, each executive worked with the key change agents around them to enable their subjectivation, and we coached that process. In this way, we were able to create a chain reaction of subjectivation across the organization. This was actually a turning point for Coach A that led to this model, and Wataru was involved in creating the shift firsthand. Wataru, would you like to share a little bit of what you did for this shift?
Yes. There came a time in the history of Coach A where we wanted to go beyond the limitations of taking one person out of the workplace and doing leadership development just for that person. We felt the need to reduce the distance between the leader's abstract awareness of themselves and their actual leadership performance. Fundamentally, leadership is a phenomenon that is rooted in relationships and developed within relationships. With this lens in mind, we developed the model Angie mentioned earlier, using real relationships in the workplace as a subject matter and trying to coach people to make concrete changes in those relationships. Our research began to statistically demonstrate that the people surrounding the people we coached were changing, and we had the opportunity to present our findings at Columbia University. When this coaching model works well, we often see the effects trickle down to the rest of the organization. We believe that in the process of making someone a leader, one becomes a leader themselves. And we believe that creating leaders who can coach leaders, thereby increasing the physical number of leaders in the workplace, is an asset to the organization. This may be the most important investment value of organizational transformation coaching. Angie, could you share the specific approach that Japan Chemics took to leverage this model?
Sure. Thank you, Wataru. So the CEO of Japan Chemics actually suggested a very interesting idea for its application. The idea was for each executive to coach a few people from a department that was different from their own. They thought that it would help create a structure where cross-border dialogue could occur. The CEO immediately explained the idea to each executive, and at first he thought that there would be a lot of objections, but he was surprised to find that most of the executives said, "Sure, this sounds interesting. Let's give it a try." And so the executives, together with the CEO, started to discuss who would coach whom. As a result, this cross-border idea contributed greatly to the success of breaking down the strong silos in the organization. In fact, through a subsequent research, we obtained empirical data that the coaching impact is greater when the coachee is from another department than when the coachee is a direct report. This project was a catalyst for these findings. And now that we've explored the importance of subjectivation, let's talk about what do we do in order to create this type of chain reaction in the organization. And next, we will touch on the systemic approach, which is what enables us to create this type of chain reaction. So when everything is done through a systemic approach, meaning approaching the whole organization, it can be very, very powerful. For Japan Chemics, the project involved all 8 executives being assigned a coach, and each of the 8 executives coaching 5 people for a total of 50 people participating in the project. When the physical number of people who are aware that they're part of the change, that they themselves are change agents and that have taken ownership increases, systemic coaching will really begin to gain power as a real movement in the organization. So we usually plan a project that lasts about 8 to 10 months and have 3 group sessions on Zoom at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the project. This is where the internal coaches and the coachees meet and actively share their coaching experiences. In the workshops, each person will clarify their understanding of the overall holistic change that they want to create and reaffirm that he or she is a key change agent who will impact this overall change. In this way, we increase the number of change agents who are aware of their close relationship with the overall whole system. This emphasis on the overall holistic system is an important part of the systemic approach and the ability to create subjectivation. Many of you might be starting to wonder then, what do we do to measure the results of such a systemic coaching projects? This is where evidence-based, the third keyword, comes in. Including the case with Japan Chemics, we usually try to take evidence from 3 different perspectives. One, from the perspective of subjectivation and its chain reaction. Second, from the perspective of changes in the organization. And third, from the perspective of business outcomes. So as we move forward, we need to be able to check ourselves of where we came from and where we are now. And it's important to be able to ask ourselves what the data, what this evidence is trying to say to us. Let me share some specific examples of what we do to see these evidence-based measurements. The first is the subjectivation of its leaders as well as the chain reaction that occurs. And we use an assessment that we developed ourselves called D-meter. What it does is it measures, number 1, the subjectivation of the internal coaches, number 2, the internal coaches' coaching competency, and number 3, the subjectivation of the coachees. This assessment is done 3 times throughout the engagement so that leaders can see the differences that their impact is having. Then for the changes in the organization, we will conduct a network survey by applying an organizational network analysis model that we have developed. We visualize the current status and the changes in relationships across the teams and organizations, and we coach people on their relationships with each other. In the case of such vividly comprehensible data, it's almost like the data begins to coach each person. The data begins to ask them new questions. And thirdly, what does all of this mean for business success and business impact? Well, Wataru will share some of his insights next.
Sure. For business impact, we relate business success, organizational transformation, and the coaching in a series of stories. But we do not undertake financial business outcomes on our own. In the case of Japan Chemics, the CEO believed it was him and his team's job to deliver business results. We need to work with our clients to understand and explain how their business has changed through coaching. For Japan Chemics, the CEO wanted the business results from the project to be the generation of operating profit through interdepartmental collaboration. But in fact, the CEO had another metric in mind. He wanted key executives to be engaged with the team for at least 2 years to limit turnover. The CEO was initially aware of the possibility that up to 4 executives could be leaving the company, but he succeeded in limiting the number to just 1 over a 2-year period. The CEO was very clear that this prevented millions of dollars in losses, and that in turn, the project was a success. This is what we do to reflect on the business impact with our clients.
And as we shared, we experienced together with our clients that for content design, it is really important to focus on the subjectivation of individuals and the chain reaction that occurs between these individuals. This is done with a focus on subjectivation, systemic approach, as well as with evidence. And this was a really significant project, not just for our client organization, but also for Wataru and myself. It is one of our most memorable projects to date because the client leveraged the systemic coaching model so well to create change in their organization. By now, some of you may be wondering, the title of your presentation is Systemic Team-Based Coaching, not just systemic coaching. Where does this team-based part come in? Well, this is in fact the last and one of the most essential ingredients that make this project so successful. In our coaching model, in order to enable a client's organization to transform, we coach the entire system, as we've mentioned. And this inevitably leads to a structure in which our team coaches the client's team. We create a team with account managers, executive coaches, professional administrators, and researchers. Because most of us work full-time at Coach A, and all of our contract coaches are coaches who have a deep understanding of our systemic coaching model, we can really work together as a team. And not only do we just create a physical team, but in the team, we also create a reflective space through a meeting style called polyphony. Some of you might be familiar with this term if you're into music. The word polyphony originally came from a music term where it describes a style of simultaneously combining a number of parts, each forming an individual medley that harmonizes with each other. And it is one of the unique things that can be made possible when you work with a team rather than individually. This space enables all members of the team to become an active part of the whole and to undergo his or her own subjectivation. Without this, we would not be in a position to be able to create the same for our clients. After all, we become mirrors for our clients in the way we show up and the way we engage them. And all of our interactions impact each other. It's at the core of one of the theories that we have incorporated into our systemic coaching model, which is social constructivism. I think I can go into details more about this concept, but it would be another talk entirely. So we will save that for another day. In summary, we provide the value of systemic coaching to our clients through a team-based approach. And we believe that this is supported by a co-creative and interactive process design, as well as a content design that really focuses on subjectivation through a systemic and evidence-based approach. We hope that the perspectives we have shared with you today have been useful. Ultimately, like I mentioned 2 slides ago, it comes down to how we show up as leaders and coaches in creating change, because we become the mirrors for our clients. So what stance do we take when we participate in an organizational transformation project? Are we just an observer outside of the system and delivering a service? Or are we a subject, a change agent that has put ourselves as part of the whole, as part of the change? This is such an important stance for all of us to take, something that Wataru and I are always aware to reflect on and check ourselves on. We also hope to make our model more effective. And as we wrap up, Wataru will share some of what we have in mind for looking into the future.
Okay. Over the past 20 years, we have worked with more than 2,000 companies. And at the same time, we have studied various Western and Eastern coaching philosophies and theories to develop the model of coaching that we shared with you today. However, our coaching model has a weakness. In fact, our clientele base clientele base is still largely comprised of Japanese companies. Looking into the future, we would like to further increase the number of global applications and learn from a variety of cases. We also feel the need to incorporate big data and IT tech to refine the current model. If any of you listening here today are interested in applying our coaching model or refining it together, please reach out to us through Angie.
Yeah, I look forward to collaborating and learning together with all of you. As practitioners of coaching for organizational transformation and developers of new models and methodologies, Wataru and I hope to continue to contribute and bring some concrete ideas to the coaching industry. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation and spending the hour with us. Thank you.